The Russian Ministry of Defense recently officially confirmed that it carried out an overnight attack using a combination of high-precision weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles UAVs targeting military facilities, as well as businesses in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv. According to information published by Ukraine's defense news site Defense Express, during this missile and UAV strike, Russia deployed an entirely new type of attack UAV equipped with a jet engine named Kanba. This is the first time this type of UAV has been used to directly attack the capital Kyiv. The source also reported that Russia deployed a large number of loitering munitions from high altitudes carrying out dive attacks on targets with high precision. This type of UAV is manufactured in Russia based on an original Iranian design and is currently being mass-produced in quantities estimated at thousands of units per month. Some sources have assessed that Russia's recent UAV attacks have increasingly focused on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, placing heavy pressure on the country's air defense system. This has led to Kyiv suffering increasingly severe damage. Defense Express also published a photo of a UAV shot down by Ukrainian air defenses, revealing several key components, most notably a small jet engine mounted on the device. Military experts and observers in Ukraine stated that the mentioned UAV is essentially a Russian-made variant of the Shahed 238 UAV developed by Iran. This is considered a significantly upgraded version compared to the earlier Shahed 136 model, which had a considerably slower speed. Specifically, the GAN UAV can reach flight speeds of 550 to 600 km/h with an operational range of up to 2,500 kilometers, while the Shahed 136 only achieves about 185 km/h. Many residents in Kyiv also reported hearing the distinctive whistling sound throughout the attack, consistent with the noise produced by the UAV's jet engine. Unlike the smaller and quieter noises of older generation UAVs equipped with propeller engines that Russia had previously used, the sound of this new UAV is much more pronounced. In the debris after the attack, Ukrainian investigators discovered an electronic control panel nearly identical to the component used on the Shahed 136. This circuit board functions to control the flight program, engine operation, and electronic systems, indicating a close design relationship between the two UAV models. Meanwhile, Russia's Avia.pro news site reported that in certain directions of the front, especially in areas of intense fighting, Ukraine's armed forces are facing a serious crisis stemming from ineffective management and inefficient use of manpower. According to some sources from Iran, the situation at the fronts in Sumy Konstantinovsky and Krasnolimansky is becoming increasingly critical, leading to high casualties among Ukrainian troops. One of the main causes of this situation is believed to be the lack of clear orders, insufficient intelligence, and poor coordination between units, which often forces soldiers to fight under extremely unfavorable and uncertain conditions. As a result, many units have been forced to surrender or have suffered heavy losses. According to a Telegram channel linked to the Russian military, many Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines are often assigned tasks without adequate training or accurate information. In particular, there have been cases where commanders deployed infantry to positions without providing precise coordinates, information about the battlefield situation, or the location of nearby Allied units, making the soldiers prone to becoming disoriented and easy targets for attacks. This situation partly reflects the increasingly serious problems within the Ukrainian army as they face a severe shortage of resources, as well as strategic mistakes in the command and control of combat operations. In a related development, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a recently published interview, made an important statement regarding the authority of the Ukrainian delegation in negotiations with the Russian side. Zelensky emphasized, "Our delegation has the authority to negotiate only on humanitarian issues matters concerning prisoners of war, the repatriation of children, or a ceasefire agreement. However, they have absolutely no mandate or authority to discuss issues related to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is a matter within the scope of the Constitution," Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized. The Ukrainian leader affirmed that all issues related to negotiations on territory with Russia remain under his direct authority and are not delegated to anyone else. Zelensky also declared that he is only willing to discuss territorial matters at the highest level, specifically through direct negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Concluding his statement, the Ukrainian president once again affirmed his principled stance. Ukraine does not recognize the legal legitimacy of the lost territories currently under Russian control. Recently, both Russia and Ukraine simultaneously announced that the two sides had conducted the second round of prisoner exchanges. This is the next step in implementing the second phase of the agreement reached at the peace talks held last week in Istanbul, Turkey. Accordingly, each side carried out the return of more than 1,000 prisoners of war. President Zelensky confirmed the information about this exchange. However, neither Russia nor Ukraine announced the exact number of soldiers released in this round of exchanges. Explaining the reason for keeping the specific figure confidential, Andriy Yusov, representative of Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency, stated that the negotiation process took place over several days under extremely difficult conditions. We faced an intense information campaign from the opposing side, including the spread of fake news and increased pressure on the families of captured soldiers, Yusov said. He emphasized not disclosing the figures at this time is extremely important. Until the entire exchange process is completed, we will not comment on specific numbers. He also called on experts, anonymous Telegram channels, and the media not to spread unverified information related to the prisoner exchange operation. If you truly act in the national interest of Ukraine and care about the safety of our soldiers, please stop sharing unverified data and avoid commenting on the number of prisoners until all stages of the exchange have been completed, Yusov added. According to a statement from Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war, the first group of released prisoners included soldiers from the Navy, Army, Air Force, National Guard, Border Guard, Territorial Defense, and the State Special Transport Service. Among them were service members who had participated in the defense of Mariupol. Many of these individuals had been held for more than 3 years. In addition to soldiers and non-commissioned officers, several senior officers were also released. Notably, all those returned were suffering from severe injuries or serious illnesses, including limb loss, impaired vision infections, shrapnel wounds, and chronic diseases. Some were also diagnosed with conditions such as hepatitis or tuberculosis. The Russian side also announced that it would return the bodies of more than 6,000 Ukrainian soldiers as a humanitarian gesture. Moscow stated that it had attempted to hand over 1 to 12 bodies to Ukraine on June 1st. However, the Ukrainian representatives at the exchange point refused to accept them. Ukrainian officials explained that the refusal was due to the two sides not reaching an agreement on procedures and accused Russia of exploiting this humanitarian issue for propaganda purposes. Economically, observers believe that Russia has accumulated sufficient resources to sustain the production of missiles and other weapons in the near future. It is assessed that if international sanctions against Russia remain, as they are, Moscow will still have enough finances to continue its war against Ukraine for at least another 3 years. However, Russia's economy is now facing several emerging issues after a period of increased energy exports, which has significantly affected its weapons production capacity, including missile manufacturing. This is the assessment in the latest report by the Washington-based research organization CSIS. The report built a forecast model based on 3 scenarios for Russia's potential economic developments in the future. According to the published summary, the 3 scenarios identified include partial easing of sanctions, maintaining the current macroeconomic situation, but with Russia gaining additional resources to expand its military campaign, or sharply strengthening sanctions, in which case Russia would rapidly deplete its war resources, forcing the Kremlin to engage in substantive negotiations. Meanwhile, Ukraine is also facing serious financial challenges. Recently, a senior Ukrainian official warned that the national budget is running out and is no longer sufficient to continue funding military operations as the war with Russia drags on with no end in sight. Ukrainian Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko admitted that the country will need to adjust this year's budget to fill the financial gap caused by the rising cost of defense. According to Marchenko, the budget shortfall stems from changes in Western support and the increasingly complex situation on the battlefield. He stated that currently funding for the armed forces is insufficient for various reasons. Therefore, the Ukrainian government will soon have to adjust the budget. The main cause of this difficulty originates from changes in military technology, the delivery schedule of weapons from foreign partners, and the escalating intensity of the fighting. In addition, Marchenko also admitted that the government did not fully anticipate the actual conditions that Ukraine would face in 2025 when the budget was drafted at the end of last year. In mid-May, Ukrainian lawmaker Yaroslav Sesniak estimated the military budget deficit at about 200 billion hryvnias, equivalent to 4.8 billion US dollars, but later raised the forecast to between 400 and 500 billion hryvnias, equivalent to 9.6 to 12 billion US dollars. According to Ukraine's Economic Pravda in April, many funds originally intended for paying military salaries at the end of 2025 were withdrawn early to purchase unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, ammunition, and other weapons. Currently, Ukraine remains heavily dependent on aid and loans from the West to sustain operations amid an economy weakened by the prolonged war. Meanwhile, Kirill Dmitriev, CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, RDIF, and investment envoy of Russian President Vladimir Putin, believes that the latest sanctions package imposed by the European Commission on RDIF and many other entities could contribute to prolonging the conflict in Ukraine. The 18th sanctions package announced by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on June 10th focuses on Russia's strategic sectors such as energy infrastructure and finance. RDIF, along with its subsidiaries and related investment projects, is among the targeted entities. According to Brooks Sense, the goal of this sanctions package is to prevent RDIF from financing initiatives to modernize Russia's economy. Dmitriev declared that by targeting RDIF, Russia's sovereign investment fund, the European Union has indirectly acknowledged it as an important channel for strengthening Russia's industrial foundation. He also emphasized that the statements by the President of the European Commission stem from a desire to prolong the conflict in Ukraine and reflect the EU's deep dissatisfaction with RDIF's efforts to restore Russia-US relations, as well as the fund's role in Moscow's peace initiatives. Dmitriev, who is known for his active role in seeking common ground between Russia and the US, recently attended several high-level meetings in Saudi Arabia and traveled to Washington in early 2025 to discuss potential investment projects in the rare earth and energy sectors areas considered strategic links in bilateral relations. Dmitriev also noted that the EU's proposal reflects opposition to the cooperation between Russian and European businesses that RDIF has actively supported in Russia. In a post on social network X on June 10th, Dmitriev stated that Russia has several joint investments with leading EU companies, emphasizing that the fund has made significant contributions to enabling many European firms to continue operating in Russia. In addition to RDIF, the new sanctions package proposes a range of supplementary measures, such as banning the use of the Engzim gas infrastructure, imposing a price cap on Russian oil, and completely halting imports of refined petroleum products of Russian origin. However, for the package to take effect, it still requires unanimous approval from all EU member states, something that is not easy to achieve. In previous sanction rounds, countries such as Hungary and Slovakia repeatedly opposed the measures, arguing that the embargo harms Europe itself more than it does Moscow. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico declared on Facebook that Bratislava would not support the sanctions package unless a genuine solution is offered to address the risk of losing energy supplies from Russia. For its part, Russia continues to reject Western sanctions, describing them as illegal and counterproductive measures. President Putin has repeatedly asserted that lifting sanctions is one of the prerequisites for achieving peace with Ukraine. According to RBC Ukraine open-source intelligence analyst Osin Depman, shared on social network X, that the Russian military has begun actively constructing shelters for aircraft. To date, 14 Russian bases have been identified as having completed shelters or shelters under construction. Satellite images show construction activities underway at several airfields, such as Kirovsky on the Crimean Peninsula, Sevastopol, Hvartsk, and Saki. On Russian territory, similar work is being carried out at airfields in Yeysk, Primorsko-Akhtarsk, the Kanskaya Air Base in Adygea, as well as in Milerovo, Borisoglebsk, Kursk-Lipetsk, and the Engels Strategic Airfield. However, claims that Russia only began building shelters at airbases after Ukraine launched the Spiderweb campaign to destroy Russian strategic aircraft are inaccurate. In reality, the construction of these shelters started in 2024, following methodical Ukrainian UAV attacks on military airfields. The need for these shelters became more urgent after Ukraine received ATACMS ballistic missiles with cluster warheads. Notably, at the Engels Air Base near Saratov, plans to build protective shelters for strategic bombers were initiated at the beginning of 2025, before Ukraine launched the Spiderweb campaign on June 1st, 2025. Satellite images of the base have confirmed this. To protect the Tu-160, a secure facility needs to accommodate an aircraft 54, 1 meters long with a wingspan ranging from 35.6 to 55.7 meters and a height of 13.1 meters. For the Tu-95MS, the required length is 49 meters wingspan, 50 meters, and height 13.2 meters. Just days before Ukrainian UAVs attacked the military airfield housing, strategic aircraft, a prototype of a mobile tent-type shelter, was unveiled. This is not a reinforced concrete bunker, but a tent-like shelter capable of effectively protecting against UAVs, cluster bombs, and withstanding harsh weather conditions. The plan includes storing not only the Tu-160, but also the Tu-95 and transport aircraft, such as the IL-76 and its variants, including the A-50. At present, the Tu-160 of the Russian military is considered the largest, fastest, and most powerful combat aircraft in the world. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Tu-160 bomber is designed to destroy key targets in military zones, remote geographic regions, and deep in enemy rear areas. The White Swan Tu-160 is built with a low-wing design integrated with variable sweep wings. The aircraft is equipped with a tricycle landing gear, a stabilizer for turning maneuvers, and 4 engines mounted in pairs under the fuselage. Additionally, 2 parallel payload bays are arranged. The main materials of the airframe include titanium, heat-treated aluminum alloy, steel alloy, and composite materials. The Tu-160 is also equipped with a state-of-the-art in-flight refueling system. According to experts, the high-speed advantage of the Tu-160 allows the aircraft to evade pursuit and missile attacks from enemy fighter jets, while easily penetrating the operational zones of opposing air defense systems. Moscow reported that its military has crossed the Don-Propet-Chopsk area and is conducting offensive operations in the region. However, this information was swiftly denied by Kiev, which called it Russian misinformation. For months, the Russian military has been trying to approach Don-Propet-Chopsk to secure the southern flank in order to capture Popsk and the remaining adjacent parts of the Donetsk region. Western military experts believe that Russia's eventual incursion into the southeastern area was anticipated. However, they suggest that neither side is likely to deploy large forces to this area because Moscow's primary goal remains to gain full control of Donetsk. Emin Chani, an analyst at the Finland-based defense research group Blackbird Group, confirmed that recent geolocated images indicate that Russian forces have crossed Don-Propet-Chopsk. Nevertheless, he assessed that Russia will likely only advance further to a certain extent in the coming months, and that this move is unlikely to shift the overall balance of the front line. Observer C. Henry also predicted that Russian forces may continue expanding their offensive northwestward from Popsk's southern flank to create an encirclement of the city, which is already threatened from the east and south. Henry argued that Russia likely understands that to pose a genuine encirclement threat, it needs to widen the flanks and continue its campaign near Popsk. On June 8th, the Russian Ministry of Defense also stated that its forces are advancing into Don-Propet-Chopsk, an area bordering Donetsk and Zaporizhia, though no combat operations have been recorded. The ministry added that units from the 90th Guards Tank Division had crossed the western border and were pushing deeper into the Don-Propet-Chopsk industrial zone. Ukraine immediately rejected this claim, asserting that fighting is still ongoing in the area and labeling Russia's information as false. Ukraine's Deep State Conflict Monitoring Project determined that Russian forces are currently only about 2 kilometers from the Don-Propet-Chopsk boundary and that the area remains under no clear control by either side. Even if not militarily decisive, Russia's penetration of Don-Propet-Chopsk province still means that another part of Ukraine has become a combat zone. This move could also help Russia increase its leverage at the negotiating table as the U.S. pushes both sides to engage in talks to end the conflict. The spring offensive launched by Russia in April has so far yielded only limited results. Aside from opening a new front in the northeastern Sumy province, where Russian forces have seized some border villages, experts see, Henry warned that if Russia manages to expand both flanks around Popsk, Ukraine's defensive lines protecting the city will be threatened, allowing Russia's logistics and support forces to move closer. This analyst stated that during the summer, Russia could threaten the remaining supply routes to Popsk, making the situation increasingly dangerous for Ukrainian forces. Mr. Sen argued that if Russia succeeds in expanding westward into Donbas and then launches an offensive to the north while maintaining pressure on the eastern flank, this could be considered a campaign success for Moscow. Military analyst Yakub Janovsky from the Oryx project that monitors Russian and Ukrainian equipment losses through open-source data said that Russia's advance 1 to 2 kilometers into Chopsk is unlikely to have a significant impact. He noted that Russia still largely relies on small-scale infantry assaults, often on foot or using motorcycles, rather than employing BMP armored vehicles or tanks as before. Mr. Janovsky assessed that Russia still seems primarily focused on the Donetsk front, but if it spots a weakness, it will seek to exploit it. Recently, a video released by a pro-Ukrainian news site showed 2 Ukrainian FPV drones identifying a warehouse containing Russian Typhoon K armored vehicles in the Kursk region and attacking the target. The first drone attacked from the top of the vehicle but appeared unsuccessful. The second then struck the driver's cabin, destroying the vehicle. The K53949 Typhoon K is a 4x4 mine-resistant armored vehicle produced by Remdizel, a subsidiary of Kamaz, to meet the requirements of armed forces and special units worldwide. The K949 Typhoon K can be used to transport troops and cargo, as well as serve as a base chassis for installing various technical systems and weapons. The K53949 Typhoon K has a weight of 13.7 tons, a length of 6.7 meters, a width of 2.5 meters, and a height of 2.8 meters. It can protect its crew against 7.62 51 mm armor-piercing rounds, anti-personnel mines, anti-tank rounds, and improvised explosive devices, IEDs. The vehicle is designed with a V-shaped hull to provide protection against mine blasts and can withstand an 8 kilux TNT explosion under the floor and a 10 kilux TNT blast under the wheels. The Typhoon K is powered by a YAMZ 5367 diesel engine with a maximum output of 350 horsepower, combined with a 6-speed automatic transmission, allowing the vehicle to travel at a top speed of 100 km/h and achieve a range of about 1,000 miles/km without refueling. The vehicle can overcome vertical obstacles up to 0.6 meters high, cross trenches 0.5 meters wide, and ford water up to 1.5 meters deep. Thanks to its high performance and superior mobility, the Typhoon K can carry a payload of 2 tons. It is equipped with a remotely controlled weapon station RCWS that can mount a 7.62 mm medium machine gun or a 12.7 mm or 14.5 mm heavy machine gun. Meanwhile, according to the June 10th combat update from TASS news agency, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that its armed forces inflicted heavy losses on the Ukrainian army along the entire front line. Russia claimed to have eliminated about 1,350 Ukrainian soldiers from combat, while destroying dozens of armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and military systems of the opponent. The Central Task Force inflicted the greatest losses on Ukraine, with over 550 soldiers eliminated. In addition, Russia said it had destroyed 6 armored vehicles, 7 artillery pieces, 6 motor vehicles, and 1 air defense missile system in the Donetsk area. The Southern Task Force eliminated over 200 Ukrainian soldiers, destroyed 1 Kozak armored vehicle, 4 motor vehicles, 2 field guns, 2 electronic warfare stations, and 3 ammunition depots in the areas of Kavest, Kasoya, and Konstantinopka. The Western Task Force removed over 210 Ukrainian soldiers from combat, destroying 2 armored vehicles, including an American M1113 and a Canadian Senator Vehicle 1 Raksa 12 rocket launcher produced by Croatia, 8 pickup trucks, and 5 ammunition depots. The Northern Task Force inflicted losses on about 130 Ukrainian soldiers, destroying 3 armored vehicles, 2 motor vehicles, 9 artillery pieces, and 2 ammunition depots in Sumy province. The Eastern and Dnipro task forces eliminated nearly 265 Ukrainian soldiers, destroying various equipment, including 5 artillery pieces, 1 American-made M198 howitzer, 5 motor vehicles, 5 electronic warfare stations, and 4 ammunition depots in the areas of Donetsk, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson. Additionally, Russian UAV missile and artillery strikes targeted 151 Ukrainian military sites, including UAV production facilities, mercenary gathering points, and rear-line weapon depots. On June 11th, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko warned that NATO's measures targeting Russia in the Baltic Sea could trigger military conflict at any moment, affirming that Moscow is ready to repel any threat from NATO in the region. According to TASS news agency speaking at the Future 2050 Forum in Moscow on June 11th, Grushko stressed that NATO's military activities and exercises in the Baltic Sea region are taking place at high intensity, and Russia is closely monitoring all these moves. He confirmed that all necessary measures have been implemented, including the re-establishment of the Moscow and Leningrad military districts to ensure the country's defense capability. Grushko also mentioned NATO's plans for rearming member states' armed forces, increasing military budgets, and restructuring command organization. These are examples highlighting the need to remain vigilant against the risk of conflict between NATO and Russia. Meanwhile, the Finnish Ministry of Defense reported that a Russian military aircraft may have violated Finnish airspace off the coast of Porvoo. The Finnish border guard has launched an investigation into the incursion. Finnish Defense Minister Antti Häkkänen stated that the investigation into the airspace violation was launched immediately. It is known that Porvoo is about 50 kilometers east of Helsinki and located at the southern tip of the country along the Gulf of Finland. Russia has not commented on these reports. Finland shares a 300-kilometer eastern border with Russia. The country applied for NATO membership in May 2022, a few months after Russia launched its military campaign in Ukraine. A few days ago, Latvia's Ministry of Defense also announced that NATO fighter jets in the Baltic region had been scrambled 3 times last week to identify and escort Russian aircraft violating aviation regulations. Specifically, NATO aircraft were deployed on June 2nd to identify 2 Russian Su-30SM aircraft. Later the same day, jets were again scrambled to identify a Su-35 fighter and a Su-24MR reconnaissance aircraft flying in international airspace. On June 4th, NATO aircraft were once again deployed to identify 2 Su-30SM aircraft in international airspace. All the mentioned Russian aircraft did not file flight plans and did not communicate by radio with the Area Control Center ATC. Previously, in just 1 week in May, NATO aircraft stationed in Baltic countries were scrambled 4 times to identify and escort Russian aircraft violating aviation rules. At that time, there were also reports that Polish fighter jets had intercepted a Russian Tu-22M bomber over the Baltic Sea in international airspace. Iranian Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh warned that if an armed conflict between Tehran and Washington breaks out, all U.S. military bases in the Middle East would become targets of Iranian attacks. Specifically, according to TASS news agency on June 11th, speaking on Iranian state television, Mr. Nasirzadeh stated that some U.S. representatives had threatened that, if negotiations failed, the situation could escalate into open conflict. He said, "I still hope for a successful diplomatic solution, but we are prepared for any scenario." He affirmed that if forced into war, the adversary would suffer heavy losses. In that situation, the U.S. would have no choice but to withdraw from the region. All U.S. bases are within Iran's strike range and would be targeted even if located on the territory of other countries. According to Mr. Nasirzadeh, Iran recently tested a missile carrying a 2-ton warhead, demonstrating the significant combat capability of its armed forces. He emphasized, "We will not accept any restrictions, and no one has the right to negotiate on this matter." The U.S. currently maintains a network of around 1,000 military bases worldwide, with over 170,000 troops deployed in more than 80 countries. In the Middle East, U.S. military facilities are located in Bahrain, Jordan, Iraq, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. Previously, on May 23rd, the U.S. and Iran held the 5th round of negotiations in Rome on Tehran's nuclear program. Oman's foreign minister, Mr. Badr al-Busaidi, who acted as mediator, said that the 2 sides had made certain progress but had not achieved a breakthrough. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that the 6th round of negotiations would take place in Muscat on June 15th. In a related development on June 11th, Russia stated that it is ready to receive nuclear materials from Iran and convert them into fuel if this could help bridge differences between the U.S. and Iran regarding the nuclear program. Speaking to the press, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that efforts need to be doubled to achieve a peaceful solution between the U.S. and Iran, and that Moscow is ready to assist in practical ways. Mr. Ryabkov said, "We are ready to assist both Washington and Tehran, not only politically, not only in the form of ideas that could be useful in the negotiation process, but also in practical terms. For example, through the export of surplus nuclear materials produced by Iran and their subsequent conversion into reactor fuel. The U.S. wants all of Iran's highly enriched uranium HEU to be removed from the country. However, Tehran is only willing to transfer the surplus that exceeds the limits agreed upon in the 2015 nuclear deal. Russia, the world's largest nuclear power, does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons, but believes that it has the right to develop its own civilian nuclear program." Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin told U.S. President Donald Trump in a phone call that he is ready to use Russia's close partnership with Iran to support the negotiations on Tehran's nuclear program. According to U.S. officials on June 11, the U.S. Department of State and Department of Defense sought to arrange the withdrawal of non-essential personnel from several locations in the Middle East. According to CNN, it is unclear what is causing this sudden change. However, a defense official said that U.S. Central Command CENTCOM is monitoring rising tensions in the Middle East. Speaking to the press on June 11 at an event at the Kennedy Center, President Donald Trump said, "They are being taken out because that place could be dangerous, and we will see what happens." Although the specific reason behind the increased security concerns in the region remains unclear, the withdrawal of personnel takes place in the context of escalating tensions involving Iran and Israel as President Trump's administration continues to pursue a new nuclear deal with Iran. According to a defense official, the U.S. Secretary of Defense has authorized family members of military personnel to voluntarily leave various locations across the Middle East. General Michael Kurilla, commander of CENTCOM, postponed a scheduled hearing before a Senate committee on June 12 due to the tense situation. Another U.S. official said that the U.S. State Department is preparing to order the withdrawal of non-essential staff from U.S. embassies in Iraq, Bahrain, and Kuwait due to increased security risks. Non-essential staff will also be withdrawn from the U.S. consulate in Erbil, Iraq. An Iraqi government official affirmed that these moves are unrelated to the security situation in the country. When asked about the reduction of personnel, a State Department official said President Trump is committed to ensuring the safety of Americans both at home and abroad. In line with that commitment, we continually reassess the appropriate staffing levels at all of our embassies. Based on the latest analysis, the U.S. has decided to reduce the size of its mission in Iraq. Late on June 11, the U.S. State Department updated its advisory and announced that an order had been issued to withdraw non-essential staff due to rising tensions in the region. Meanwhile, President Trump stated that he is increasingly skeptical about the possibility of reaching an agreement with Iran to curb its nuclear ambitions. In a recent interview, he said that Iran might be stalling to delay the signing of a deal. Also on June 11th, Trump told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stop making statements about the possibility of attacking Iran. Last month, CNN reported that the U.S. had gathered new intelligence indicating that Israel was preparing to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. Two intelligence sources said that the U.S. had detected signs that Israel was positioning forces, including moving weapons and completing an Air Force drill. However, officials warned that it remains unclear whether Israel's leadership has made a final decision and noted that there are deep divisions within the U.S. government over whether Israel will actually take action. For his part, Iranian Defense Minister Amir Hatami warned that if nuclear negotiations with the U.S. fail and conflict breaks out, the U.S. would be forced to withdraw from the region. Brigadier General Nasserzadeh said that in such a scenario, the adversary would certainly suffer greater damage, although he did not specify whether he was referring to the U.S., Israel, or both. Speaking to the state news agency, IRNA, he emphasized, "Some officials on the opposing side have made threatening statements warning of the possibility of conflict if no agreement is reached in the U.S.-Iran negotiations." He warned that in that case, the U.S. would have no choice but to leave the region as all of their bases are within range of the Iranian military and would be targeted without hesitation. A series of tanks and various military vehicles are being transported en masse to Washington, D.C. by rail in preparation for a historic parade under President Donald Trump. According to CNN, more than 3,000 tons of heavy military equipment are expected to roll through the streets of the U.S. Capitol in less than 2 weeks. This event fulfills a long-held dream of President Trump, but at the same time raises concerns about whether the streets of Washington, D.C. can bear the enormous weight of the tanks and heavy combat vehicles. The parade will feature dozens of M1A1 Abrams tanks, along with Bradley and Stryker, fighting vehicles, artillery, and various other equipment. It is estimated that about 6,600 to 7,000 troops will participate in the parade, along with historical reenactments in period costumes and military bands. The Army's Golden Knights parachute team will conclude the event by presenting President Donald Trump with an American flag. Most of the tank's vehicles and equipment are currently en route from Fort Cavazos in Texas to Maryland and are expected to arrive at a rail station in Jessup, Maryland, early next week. From there, they will be transferred onto flatbed trucks for continued transport to Washington. According to the U.S. Army, the Army Corps of Engineers, leading efforts to protect Washington, D.C.'s transportation infrastructure, is fully confident in the mitigation measures being implemented, which have already cost more than $3 million. To date, the total cost of the entire parade could reach as much as $45 million, according to officials' estimates. The protective measures include laying steel plates on road surfaces, especially at turns where tanks will maneuver, fitting all vehicles with new track pads to reduce pressure and create a buffer between the metal and the asphalt, and ensuring that tanks move at walking speed throughout the parade. Officials said that Colonel Jess Curry, director of the Office of the Chief of Engineers, told CNN that the military has worked closely with numerous agencies and utility companies in Washington during the planning process to minimize potential damage. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump told NBC that the cost of the parade is a small price compared to the spiritual value it brings. He emphasized, "We have the strongest missiles in the world. We have the best submarines in the world. We have the top military tanks in the world. We have the most powerful weapons in the world, and we are going to celebrate that." Critics, including some members of the U.S. Congress, have questioned the expense, especially as the government is working to cut the federal budget. According to information from Lieutenant General Kirill Budanov, director of Ukraine's Defense Intelligence GUR, Russia is transferring Shahed 136 suicide drone production capabilities to North Korea. He believes this could alter the military balance on the Korean peninsula, while also expanding the strategic threat to both South Korea and Ukraine. In an exclusive one-hour interview with the War Zone last weekend, General Budanov shared his views on a range of issues from the situation in Ukraine, drone operations, anti-Russian waterways, to the possibility of a dual strike on Russian nuclear submarines. In the most notable part of the interview, General Budanov revealed that Russia is providing technology and expertise to help North Korea develop long-range suicide drones, particularly the Shahed series, while also improving the accuracy of the KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles. In addition, Moscow is assisting Pyongyang in developing its fledgling submarine-launched nuclear deterrent force. North Korea has now become one of Russia's key military partners, supplying millions of artillery shells and even troops in exchange for advanced military technology from Moscow. General Budanov emphasized that the production capability for the Shahed drone series, which has been Ukraine's top aerial threat for years, is being transferred from Russia to North Korea. Originally designed by Iran, this drone is now domestically produced by Russia at a rate of about 2,000 units per month, with the goal of increasing output to 5,000 units within a month. Russia is continuously improving the range, warhead, weight, connectivity, and attack tactics of this drone type. If North Korea acquires Shahed drones, it will be capable of launching large-scale strikes on any target in South Korea beyond the capacity of current air defenses. These drone attacks could pave the way for other types of weapons, and some of them could even be exported back to Russia to support the war in Ukraine. General Budanov also revealed that the first batch of KN-23 missiles sent by North Korea to Russia was of poor quality, with around 50% veering off course or exploding mid-air, according to reports from Ukraine's prosecutor's office. However, with Russian assistance, the KN-23 has been significantly improved, achieving high lethal accuracy and providing Moscow with a valuable source of short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs, at a critical time. Russia's active transfer of military technology to Pyongyang, according to General Budanov, will shift the balance of power in Northeast Asia, posing new strategic risks for South Korea, Japan, and the international community. News of the drone production deal comes amid increasingly close defense ties between Russia and North Korea. According to a May 29, 2024 report by the MSMT Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Group, Pyongyang transferred about 9 million artillery shells and at least 100 ballistic missiles to Russia in 2024 alone. North Korea began directly supporting the special military operation in Ukraine in the fall of 2024, deploying thousands of troops to Russia's western border regions to help repel Ukraine's large-scale counteroffensive. This move followed the signing of a mutual defense treaty between the two countries in June 2024, under which each side pledged military support if the other were attacked. North Korea officially acknowledged its role in the military operation in Ukraine in January 2025. A month later, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un declared the participation in the war a sacred mission to strengthen the Allied stance with Moscow.